Like a death, the gavel smashed down. Evangeline Morrison stood on the sentence. Her hands were shaking on that wooden platform. Men yelled numbers like she below. Was cattle, however, when Silas Thornfield held up his palm and yelled a fee. That made everyone in the crowd quiet. Could have foreseen the outcome. Millbrook County has then experienced its fair share of sales, but nothing like to this. The October sun relentlessly pounded the town square as Cornelius Webb, the judge, wiped perspiration from his brow and spoke. Ava's booming over the assembled crowd. Father had passed away with debt to half the in his 19-year-old territory. She kept the price her daughter was paying. She stared at the wooden planks underfoot, unwilling to confront the men's hungry stares beneath. The majority of they weren't there to serve as a housekeeper. And everyone was aware that the rumors had began a few weeks ago when the judge, a young woman, announced the auction. Single, without a place to call home, and without Thornfield's family to safeguard her, Silas stood behind the throng, his worn face that cannot be read behind his at 45. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and was among the most respected cattlemen in 3 counties where his wife passed away 3 years prior, abandoning him on 1,000 acres spread that was more labor-intensive than he could afford. But respect was not a determining factor. Man impervious to the town and loneliness rumors had been speculating about when he might take a second wife. The bidding began. Low yet swiftly ascended Jake Morrison yelled out to old Pete for $15 from the saloon. Williams has 2 marriages. Already, when it was up to 25, the audience became agitated. As the cost increased, some then uncomfortably shifting as they became aware they were outbid at that point. Martha Caldwell saw Silas beginning to send. The woman in charge of the boarding house had taken it upon herself to find out affairs of everyone, and she had never seen the rancher's expression was so. His jaw was fixed, and his eyes were solely focused on the girl in the middle of them all. When the majority of men began bidding, when it hit $40, retraction was more costly than some in 6 months. Families saw Silas, although without hesitation. He raised his hand, and a voice piercing the October atmosphere like a $50 blade. The audience became quiet. Judge Webb's gaze grew wide as even Eva peered up at the rancher down below. Her green eyes, for the first time among the sea of faces, locating Silas. He was distinctive in some way. Something that caused her stomach to turn with doubt as opposed to the absolute. She had been terrified when she saw the others. Webb requested better bids, but nobody did. $50 was a lot of money for what most men believed it would be. A short-term plan, they believed. Silas would get weary of the girl in a few of months, and she would return to the place where she began. The gavel arrived with finality and was sold to Silas Thornfield. As people started to, Martha Caldwell dispersed and observed as she approached the platform. The rancher I've known Silas since he came to 20 years prior. Millbrook County had seen he started his ranch from scratch and lament his wife's passing with all of his heart torn away from his chest. Yet the way he gazed at the girl while assisting as she descended off the podium, Martha's blood run cold due to the fact that, over her years of witnessing the revelation of people's secrets, she had become aware of the distinction between a man purchasing real estate and a man executing a strategy, and whatever plans Silas Thornfield had, it was going to change their peaceful village. The wagon voyage to Silas was inverted. The length of Thornfield's ranch was greater than. Eva sat as rigidly as she could have imagined. Her hands were clenched so tightly next to him, her knuckles had turned in her lap. Every jolt in the sandy road sent white panic attacks in her chest because she was still unaware of what this man, not what she had planned to do with her Silas, spoken anything since they had left town. The rein was held by aged hands. His gaze remained constantly focused on the horizon, where she found his ranch waiting like a prison. Unable to flee, Eva stole looks at his profile, looking for any indication of his persona, but nothing was seen on his face. She was aware that the town behind them was already rife with conjecture. Martha, she would host Caldwell's court, examining every aspect of a boarding house of the auction for anybody who is prepared to. The men who were outbid would listen, be burying their disillusionment in whiskey as their spouses murmured on the true nature of Silas Thornfield desired. With a girl who is 19 years old, but Eva had gained knowledge of terror in the weeks after the passing of her father. It wasn't the piercing fear that suddenly struck and left you in a state of shock. It was the sluggish, crushing conviction that your existence was not no longer your own, which each decision had been taken away before you even realized it. There were options when the ranch house Ava's breath eventually appeared. It wasn't the rough that got stuck in her throat cabin she had anticipated, but a sturdy two-story house with a porch that wraps around, with windows that let in the afternoon shade, was given by light cottonwood trees throughout the grounds, and she could observe grazing livestock in pastures that stretched in the direction of far-off mountains. Appeared to be a location where individuals could be glad that she was afraid of this realization. There would be. Silas, more than any other fell, pulled the cart to a halt before the house, then descended without Ava's words, stayed still on the seat, unsure if she was expected to obey or bide his time till he turned to face her once more. Her face had somewhat softened, yet she was unable to discern the emotion in his with dark eyes. He extended his hand to assist. Eva hesitated before putting her down. Embracing it, his touch was soft rather than possessive, as she had been afraid, but being gentle could be a trap in and of itself, and she had come to distrust goodwill. It was attached to the house's price tag, felt more expansive within than it had the main room. As seen from the road, had a large enough stone fireplace to stand in and furnishings that exuded coziness instead of survival. But what really got to Ava striking was the sense of emptiness that pervaded the walls themselves were retaining their Silas took off his hat and hung it up, for the first time, on a peg near the door since he gazed straight at the auction Ava, and she noticed something in his, a look that made her tummy turn over, with a fresh sense of terror, since it was not the famished expression she had anticipated. It wasn't from the men at the auction. Desire, ownership, or even informal interest, it was a man's expression that had spent so much time bearing a load that it was now a part of him, and in some way she was going to be included in that burden as well. But his next words would destroy all of her presumptions. Regarding the reason he had purchased her, Silas cleared his throat and pointed to a seat, his voice near the hearth when it was rougher than Ava's when it finally arrived, anticipated as a man who had matured, unfamiliar with the type of talk. You'll have the room at the end of the staircase. Upstairs there is a lock on the interior of the hall. She blinked, sure she had misheard him. Lock inside, that didn't make sense for what she believed he had purchased for her, because she stood there, her body tense. I don't understand, with bewilderment and skepticism. Comprehend, she muttered, and Silas moved to the picture on the mantelpiece that has faded of a woman with compassionate eyes keeping watch over the room. He lightly touched the frame and even noticed his shoulders slumping with sorrow. My wife seemed to have that in his bones. 3 years ago, Sarah passed away from cancer. Gradually, until there was no more, his voice cracked, but there was enough left to fight. Somewhat, but prior to her death, I made a promise that I believed was Ava's heart can't be kept hammered, while she waited for him against her ribs. To keep going outside, the wind increased, resulting in the whispering of cottonwood trees against the glass as if they were secrets. Sarah always desired a daughter, so years passed, but the good Lord had, as she was dying, she had other intentions. Asked me to locate a female in need of a home, needed a family. But she was unable to. You may relax knowing that there were young ladies out there alone and without a place to go. To keep them safe, the words struck Eva like a bodily assault. She staggered back before her legs collided with the chair, and she fell into it without considering this. Wasn't what she had anticipated. Degradation, dread, violation, she'd stole herself during it, but it felt like a horrible act of kindness, protection. She joked, I don't believe you, and seldom audible. Silas looked away from I saw pain carved in the picture. Each feature of his grizzled face. I understand the appearance of a man my age purchasing a girl sufficiently young to be his daughter. The entire village is most likely fabricating tailies regarding what transpires here, so why? She blurted out the question before why would she purchase me like way when she could stop it. Why not just lend a hand in some way, because Judge you wouldn't have been allowed to leave Webb otherwise. Way, he has personal debts and the quickest way was to auction you off. To pay off the estate of your father you'd be in far worse shape if you hadn't bid. Circumstances of the moment, Eva wished to trust him with all her instincts. Yearned for the security he provided, but she had discovered that the words of men were inexpensive, and their assurances are even more affordable. Her father had pledged to support her till the day he placed his wager, taking everything they had. What do you think? Want in exchange? She said in a voice. Growing stronger, no one takes action. Silas was silent for a long time for no reason. Moment, his eyes going back to his wife's picture when he repeated what he had said, bore the burden of a man who had been battling with choices that aren't possible for me, to fulfill my wife's final request and perhaps find some calm by doing the right thing. Someone in need, but even when he said those words, the sound of horses that were approaching came through the windows, show several riders traveling quickly. As Eva moved toward the house, her blood turned crimson ice when she realized the significance. She was being pursued by someone, and whatever the sanctuary that Silas provided was roughly the horsemen thundered into it to be tested. The yard like a tempest erupting. Eva counted 6 via the front window. A deputy marshal and men on horseback behind him. Garrett Boone rode a portion of the identical men who attended the auction, their faces contorted from drinking, and something more repulsive than let down. Silas walked over to the gun rack next to the door. His motions were quiet yet purposeful. Avoid the windows, he advised Eva, silently and no matter what. Don't let they notice that you're terrified. Deputy Boone dismounted and made his way to the porch. The sound of spurs jangling on wooden steps. Eva had already spotted him around town. A man who wore his badge as if it were a badge authorization to steal everything he desired. Jake Morrison from the saloon behind him poured tobacco liquid upon the ground. Bloodshot eyes looking around the house. Thornfield, yelled Boone, we must discuss with you the girl you purchased. Silas opened the front door today, but did not ask them to attend. Eva pressed herself up against the wall next to the fireplace. Near enough to hear, but her heart felt like it was concealed from view. May rip itself to pieces. What about her? Deputy? Well, it appears that there have been some issues brought up regarding the legitimacy of that web. The auction judge might have exceeded his power. Boone's voice had a smugness that caused Eva's skin to become "We're come to retrieve the girl, crawl. To town for appropriate Eva processing." She knew that her breath had stuck in her throat. Whatever processing they did, that was a falsehood. Intended wouldn't occur in any courthouse. The sale was legitimate, and recorded Silas's steady response. Perhaps the girl's obligation was fairly settled. Jake Morrison then yelled from behind. Nevertheless, a man your age maintaining a youthful girl like that doesn't seem appropriate. Good people may need to be checked on her well-being and ensure that she's being the danger in his voice was appropriately handled. Was obvious. Eva shut her eyes. Sensing the trap closing in on her completely, she had repeatedly believed that Silas might be distinct, but how could one man endure? Why would he even try against 6? Silas, you guys can now ride back to town. His tone became colder as he spoke. To the girl. Boone stayed here and made a noise that sounded like shattering glass. I doubt you comprehend the circumstances. Thornfield, when we don't ask for permission. Eva heard the characteristic noise of cocking a rifle through the glass. She watched Silas enter the porch completely. His weapon was ready, but it wasn't aimed yet, and I doubt you comprehend mine. This is my property, Silas retorted, and I'm protecting the girl if you want me to. A signed warrant is required in order to take her by a federal judge rather than a phony excuse. The tension by mentioning welfare checks was sufficiently thick in the yard to chop. Eva became aware that she was holding her breath, trapped between something that is frightening, and perhaps there was hope that no one had ever defended her before her father did. If you were Eva, no one or the law would care. How would you go about believing that Silas could shield you, remain hidden, or come forth yourselves to avoid any potential bloodshed? Tell me in the comments how to get him killed. Need to know what decision you would make. Due to Eva's decision, at that precise moment, would decide if she survived to witness another dawn. The hand of Deputy Boone moved. Eva was aware of his attitude toward his pistol. Regardless of the decision she made, someone was about to incur an unaffordable cost. Eva undid herself and entered the doorway. Before she was able to halt, the scene of her caused an instant silence in the yard, 6 sets of eyes looking toward the direction her as wolves might when they spot prey. Yet rather than the apprehension they anticipated, she talked with a raised chin and a steadiness that even she was surprised by. "I voluntarily intend to remain here, Mr. Thornfield, has shown me nothing but deference." The clouded face of Deputy Boone. "Girl, you unsure about what's healthy for you as a man, Thornfield's tastes are similar to the voice of Deputy Boone. Silas pierced, you're on my territory, and the air feels like a blade. Putting my family in danger, I advise you think twice before you speak again." With great caution, the word struck Eva like a physical assault that isn't unpleasant. When was the last time someone had called her family? Jake Morrison spat his hand. "Once more, it's absurd that he is hanging close to his gun. Thornfield, you cannot simply purchase a wife and anticipate that. She's not my wife." Silas responded coolly but firmly, saying that she's protected by me as my ward's legal guardian and appropriately observed by the entire town. Although while he was speaking, Eva could see the 6 armed men were calculating in Boone's eyes. Opposing. One, even if it was Silas the deputy, Thornfield was weighing his opportunities. And Eva understood with increasing he enjoyed his odds, which is a horror. When more horses' voices arrived at them via Eva's main road, thinking of more of Boone's men made my heart sink. "We're coming in," but Silas's stance straightened using a device that could Marcus Wade, a relief sheriff, brought 2 of his horses into the yard. Deputies, his grizzled face absorbing the scene with a man's keen eyes who has long anticipated trouble. Wade was one of the few police officers in the land that could not be purchased. It earned him respect and duty. Boone, Wade remarked, is dangerous, voice conveying the authority that arrived from maintaining the peace for 30 years. "Might what brings you to Mr. Thornfield's, may I ask?" Ranch with the swagger of an armed posse. Boone stumbled a little. "Sheriff Wade and we were just making sure the girl is doing okay, ensuring that everything is above and within the law." When Board WD's gaze shifted to Eva, she seen something in his face that informed her that he knew exactly what kind this welfare check was intended to be. "Are you present against your will, miss?" "No, sir," Eva said, her voice growing louder. "Power, Mr. Thornfield has provided me with a home and requested nothing inappropriate." And the sheriff nodded slowly in response, returned his focus to Boone, and then I think your business here is over, unless you have a warrant. Deputy Wade, I see you now, but I haven't seen you here." The weight was carried by WD's voice of supreme power. "You're pestering a citizen on his own land so I recommend that you and your men's head return to town before I make the decision to examine what's actually happening." In the Boone's expression was a clear sign of danger. Reddened, but he was aware that he shouldn't confront Sheriff Wade directly following after a long time. He got back on his horse and eyes blazing with a promise of wrath. "This ain't finished." This wasn't, he said. "Thornfield," while wheeling his ride around, saying, "Girl, she bring only misery to you." As down the road riders vanished and Eva felt her knees weaken under the dust cloud. Relieved, but Sheriff Wade got from his horse and went to the porch, his face to Mr. Thornfield. "Miss Morrison." He tipped his head and remarked, "I'm afraid Deputy Boone may be correct on this one. Circumstance will provide you with more difficulties than you anticipated." And after hearing those words, Eva understood their issues had only recently started. If you're having fun with this article, please hit the subscribe button. Due to Sheriff Wade's announced next would alter everything. They believed. They were aware of Ava's history. The sheriff's findings regarding the silence would be broken by Ava's father. Refuge in the most hazardous area in the area that Sheriff Wade agreed to the coffee offer from Silas. But his grizzled hands quivered a little as Eva sensed the shaking when she lifted the cup, and felt her stomach fall, regardless of the news. He was so awful that he could shake a guy who had defeated Indians and outlaws. Raids Miss Morrison, without flinching. Wade started out cautiously. "What do you know regarding your father's commercial activities?" And Eva scowled. In the months prior to his passing, he claimed to be looking into her memory. Purchasing cattle promised to make us wealthy. Soon after he had figured out how to get back, we had lost the words to everything. Now hollow, like the remnants of a dream, she'd been duped into thinking that Wade and Eva and Silas exchanged a glance that made Silas said, "Sheriff, blood run cold. Tell us quietly that your father wasn't making a cattle investment. Miss Morrison, he was transporting stolen gold for the Carmichael gang." Eva was struck by the words like a forceful punch. She clutched the side of the table to prevent it from toppling over. Legendary was the Carmichael gang in 3 regions, vicious murderers who'd bank and rail robberies from Colorado to Black Pete. Their commander in California, Carmichael, was the target of a bounty that would provide a man with lifelong wealth. "That's impossible," Eva muttered. "My dad wasn't a criminal, but I was a gambler." "I'm worried it gets worse," Wade added. His sympathetic voice said, "The gold, it was being transported for them by your father. Vanished the day before he passed away. Gold bars worth $30,000 have vanished without a trace." Silas's face leaned forward. "You're referring to the Carmichael gang. Grave believes Eva is aware of its whereabouts. According to my sources, they are certain of it. This is how Black Pete himself is writing. With 12 men, they believe Miss Morrison's father revealed to her his hiding place." Eva sensed the gold before he passed away, whirling the room around her, but he didn't tell me anything. He passed away while he was sleeping. Never had the opportunity to bid farewell to that the Carmichael gang won't care. Grimly, Wade remarked, "They've slaughtered entire families for under $30,000, and today word of the auction spread, and they know just where to look for you." The sheriff looked at Silas's face. "Gravely dangerous Thornfield, you must recognize what you've acquired. Are not inexperienced rustlers or Pete Carmichael. Black cowboys intoxicated once destroyed a whole community due of the local sheriff gave him a strange look. If they believe Eva has their treasure, this place will be torn apart by board." Silas concluded in a low voice, and Eva stood suddenly getting up, her chair clanging against the hardwood floor. "I'll go now. We'll not bring this on to you after. What have you done for me?" "Take a seat," Silas firmly stated. "You're not going to wherever you don't comprehend." These men's voices broke with despair. "We'll murder you and set your home on fire. I won't demolish what you've constructed. Be in charge of that silo standing," and went to the window overlooking the ranch that he had constructed for 20 years when he looked back into their eyes. Had a resolve that brought to mind even why he was admired by men from this how much time. "Do we have Denver Sheriff?" "According to accounts, they may be gone for 2 days. 3, if they pause to give their horses a break, then we can get ready to move the Silas." Eva went to a cabinet and took out a box. Had not before observed that there were more weapons and ammo than she had ever. This ranch has been spotted in one location. Assaulted before to an Apache cattle raid according to thieves, jumpers are still standing since I acquired the ability to protect. This is what happened when Wade shook his head. The Carmichael gang isn't some other. You can frighten off a raiding group using a few warning signs that they are murderers, and they will continue until they receive what they desire. Then perhaps it's time they discovered that there are some things worth dying for." Silas answered softly, and I started crying, her eyes blazing as she recognized what he said. This guy who didn't really know her was prepared to put everything on the line to shield her, but as she observed she also noticed a determined expression on his face. Another factor that caused her blood to flow freeze, because concealed within that package of weapons were an inappropriate item. A leather satchel that was identical to the one her dad ever carried, and if regarding the missing, Sheriff Wade was correct. That pouch could contain the key to touching it while keeping them all alive would entail abandoning the one man who had ever attempted to keep her safe, and waited until both men went outside to make sure the perimeter prior to her arrival at the. Her hands trembled as she raised the weapon box. The weight of the leather pouch verified her worst fears. While wrapping, there were 3 gold bars in oiled cloth that stuck in the lamplight. Her father had concealed the stolen in Silas's home, gold, the man who'd shown her nothing but love. Was keeping evidence that could be used against him. He was hanged without even realizing it. Eva heard boots on the porch, hurrying to conceal the purse where she had discovered it, and Silas went in by himself, grimaced due to the burden of preparation. He'd spent the last hour positioning guns at strategic windows and checking ammunition supplies. Sheriff Wade's heading back to town to get additional guys, Silas said, not seeing Ava's guilty saying. He'll return by daybreak with